Hey there, Michael Church, Crawlspace Ninja. Have you ever heard these horror stories about these homeowners hiring contractors to fix their crawl space to their basement, only to end up with a crawl space or a basement that's still wet, moldy, or even worse, damaged beyond repair? Unfortunately, this happens way more often than we might think. In fact, according to recent home improvement surveys, over 50% of homeowners report being unhappy with a contractor's work, and nearly 1 in 3 say that they experienced issues like poor workmanship, hidden costs, and unfinished jobs. When it comes to your crawl space or your basement, which is the foundation of your home's health, hiring the wrong contractor can lead to long-term moisture problems, mold growth, and even structural damage. That's why doing your due diligence before you hire a contractor is not only smart, it's absolutely essential. In this video, I've come up with questions that every homeowner should ask a crawl space or basement contractor before hiring them. These questions can help you avoid making costly mistakes, identify red flags, and make sure your contractor truly understands encapsulation, mold remediation, waterproofing, and of course, indoor air quality. If you find this information helpful, please subscribe to our channel and make sure you like this video. I put out new content every week to help you have a healthy home. And if you'd like to have a little extra peace of mind, you can actually book a one-on-one consultation with me through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the description of this video or podcast. I will personally go over your contractor's bid with you and make sure that the scope of work that they're doing is done in the right way and in the right order to make sure you have a worry-free crawl space or basement. And we also cover attics as well if you're getting your attic done. Now let's dive into the 19 questions you should ask your crawl space or basement contractor before hiring them. Question number 1, and these aren't in any particular order, but one of the biggest things I would ask is, do you have liability insurance? That is a huge problem nowadays, where you have a lot of companies out there that are operating without liability insurance or enough liability insurance. We recommend at least $1 million in liability coverage. But another little tip that I would recommend you do is, once you verify that they have liability insurance, if they show you that certificate, that doesn't mean that it's current or paid in full up to that point. They could have got that certificate and then canceled the policy and just showed you the certificate that the insurance gave them to show, and they aren't currently insured. So you can actually ask to be added as additional insured on their liability policy to make sure that they are current on their payments. Another thing that's vital is if they are a company that has employees, depending on what state you're in. Of course, as far as I know, all states require those employees to be covered by work comp or workman's compensation insurance. That is to protect you as the homeowner. If any of the employees get hurt on the job, they're not going to go back and sue you or sue your property insurance. That they have that insurance in place along with liability. Those are 2 different insurance plans, so make sure they have workman's comp as well. The other thing you want to make sure is, are they licensed in your state to do the work that they have been contracted to do? Not every state requires a general contractor's license. For example, here in Tennessee, we can operate in what's called a home improvement license or a limited liability license. Some states don't require any type of license. They'll just have, say, a county certificate or a county license that's not at the state level. But I would recommend that you check into that and make sure they are properly licensed in what they do. And the other thing is, if they're doing electrical work or plumbing work or HVAC work, that may institute a separate license other than a general practice license, okay? So in order for a plumber or an electrician to operate in the state of Tennessee, that's a specialty license that those professionals have, which we as crawl space encapsulation contractors would not need. Another thing that may come up, depending on what part of the country you're in and the particular municipality that you reside in. For example, if you're in the city, you want to make sure whether a permit is required to do the work. A lot of times in Tennessee, in the counties, they don't require any type of permits, but some counties do, some counties don't. So if you check that out at your local level, call your local county or your municipality and ask if a permit is required, then that way the permit can be pulled for the job. The other thing is, who is required to pull the permit? Is it the homeowner that is required to pull the permit, or the contractor? And is that price of the permit built into the job? Is it in addition to the job? Those are some good questions to ask. Okay, so if you're keeping track, this is question number 5 that you should ask. Does the company hire subcontractors to do the work? Now, Crawlspace Ninja, unless we go with, say, a temp service that we might need on a larger job, we do not subcontract out any work. All of our professionals are trained and certified here locally by the branches, or if they're a franchise, they're trained and certified at the branch to do the work that we've done. We actually have a 90-day training program that we put all of our ninjas through, some classroom, mostly OJT, on the job training. So we don't recommend you hire people that use subcontractors to do the work. We feel like that's something that the company should keep in-house. But if they do hire subcontractors to do that work, are the subcontractors covered by the liability insurance that I mentioned before? Are those subcontractors covered by workman's comp? Those are responsibilities that the contractor should make sure of, and that is the responsibility you should make sure the contractor has asked as well. So it gets a little complicated, but you want to make sure anybody setting foot on your property to do work is properly licensed, properly insured, work comp is in place. And what happens if the contractor doesn't pay the subcontractor? Are you on the hook for that sort of thing? So those are some great questions to ask. Okay, so the 6th question to ask your crawl space encapsulation contractor is, do you offer mold cleaning? And if so, are you properly insured to offer mold cleaning? Most people don't realize that mold remediation or mold cleaning carries a separate liability policy on the insurance. In other words, you can have a general liability policy like I mentioned before, but if you're going in there and doing mold remediation or any kind of mold application of a disinfectant, the insurance companies require a rider policy to cover that mold work, okay? So a general liability policy would not cover any mold work. So make sure that you ask your crawl space encapsulation contractor if they have the proper mold removal liability policy rider. And again, make sure you're listed as an additional insured to keep track of whether it's current. I want to talk about the different types of mold cleaning that they can offer. I would ask that as well. What type of mold cleaning do you do, Mr. Crawl Space Encapsulation Contractor? Are you going to do a soda blasting where you visibly remove all the mold off the joist? Are you going to go in there and scrub it off? Are you going to use HEPA vacuuming? And then once all that's done, are you going to apply some type of disinfectant? And then once that's done, are you going to put on a protectant to keep it from coming back? So those are some good questions to ask. So that would be question number 7. Question number 8 I would ask is, okay, Mr. Mold remediator that's going to encapsulate my crawl space, what about the humidity and the wood moisture level of the wood? You showed me that the wood moisture is high. The humidity is obviously high because I have mold down there. Are you going to dry out the wood and lower that humidity prior to beginning any mold remediation? Or are you just going to go in there with all the wood being wet and squirt some kind of bleach solution or some kind of disinfectant on there? Tell me your process on how you're going to dry the space out prior to getting started with that mold, because believe it or not, most contractors do not dry the space out, and then the mold can return within 24 to 48 hours. So you don't want to have to treat it again if the wood is still wet. The next question I would ask is, do you offer a guarantee? So a guarantee would be like a satisfaction guarantee or something before you hand over final payment. So in other words, are you going to show me pictures that all the work has been done? You're guaranteeing the work is completed properly. You're guaranteeing I'm going to be happy with the work before I give you a final payment. Okay, number 10, believe it or not, there is a difference between a warranty and a guarantee. So a guarantee would be like, I'm making sure you're 100% satisfied, guarantee, but a warranty would be like, let's say the dehumidifier breaks a year from now, who's going to take care of that for you? And then within that, you have 2 types of warranty. There's a workmanship warranty offered by the encapsulation contractor, and then there might be a manufacturer's warranty on the products that they install, like the dehumidifier or the sump pump. So ask them what their warranties are. At Crawlspace Ninja, our dehumidifiers and our sump pumps are covered for 5 years by the manufacturer, but we also offer a service agreement that can offer a lifetime warranty that Crawlspace Ninja takes over after the manufacturer warranty has expired. So make sure all that is explained to you so you know what kind of warranties are applicable for your encapsulation. And real quick on warranties, is there a mold warranty? Now, Crawlspace Ninja, as far as I know, is one of the only companies that offers any kind of mold warranty, and some companies won't even guarantee that they take care of the mold properly. So our gold and platinum systems have a 1-year standard mold warranty that could be extended to life of the Crawlspace encapsulation. So make sure you ask your local representative about our mold warranties as well. So question number 12 I would ask that goes along with the mold and the encapsulation and keeping the Crawlspace dry is, if you are drying out the Crawlspace, Mr. Encapsulation Professional, what guarantees do I have that the Crawlspace is going to stay dry? In other words, are you going to install a dehumidifier, and is that dehumidifier going to be permanently installed so that it controls humidity and wood moisture level on a continual basis? Or are they just putting in a temporary dehumidifier to dry the Crawlspace out and then removing it after they do the mold remediation and the plastic is up? Because believe it or not, there are some companies out there that don't believe in installing permanent dehumidifiers, and we feel like that is the best way to make sure the humidity is controlled all the time. First of all, Mr. Crawlspace Encapsulation Contractor, do you offer waterproofing or water management? That would be the first thing I would ask them. And if they do, then I would ask them what type of water management or waterproofing do they offer? Do they offer a buried pipe that goes around the inside of the perimeter that hits a sump pump and then gets discharged out of there? Or do they put some kind of dimple underlayment down to move the water out of that exit point? Do they cut a hole in the footer or the foundation and run some kind of gravity-fed drain line out of the Crawlspace? Do they just lay the pipe on the ground like we've seen many contractors do and don't even bury it? Ask them how they waterproof if they do waterproof. A couple more things about waterproofing is how many linear feet apart are the sump pumps going to be placed? In other words, if you've got a 300 linear feet crawl space, you would probably need at least 2 sump pumps in that situation. We recommend one about every 140 linear feet because it's very difficult for water to travel a really long distance inside of these pipes because they're gathering water in every area of the crawl space most of the time. So you want to make sure there's enough exit points for that discharge, for that water to discharge out of the crawl space. So how many linear feet do you set your sump pumps? Another question in regards to waterproofing is, will you be installing and attaching a vapor barrier as part of your waterproofing process? Because believe it or not, throwing down some loose laid vapor barrier or recycling your old vapor barrier when installing a waterproofing system is not very effective. The water's going to flood in, move the vapor barrier, then you got water on top of the plastic that can't even make its way into the waterproofing system. So ask them how they plan on installing a vapor barrier as part of that system. As I mentioned about dehumidifiers, I want to talk to you about ventilation. Most crawl space encapsulation companies have never heard of this concept before, but according to the EPA, you're supposed to ventilate 1 CFM of air for every 50 square feet of crawl space. So what we do is a combination of humidity control with ventilation. So you've got to have that dehumidifier to control humidity. But Mr. Crawl Space Contractor, are you going to install some type of foundation vent fan or active ventilation to move those soil gases like radon or methanes or smells out of the crawl space on a continual basis? Because those gases can build up inside the crawl space when you seal off all the vents and go directly into the living space. So you want to make sure you take care of that as well. So the 17th question I would ask that crawl space encapsulation contractor is, what type of vapor barrier do you use? Do you use a cheap 6 mil plastic that you're only going to throw on the ground, and if they attempt to attach it to the wall, it'll rip because the nail will rip it out, or something like that? So make sure you're using a good solid vapor barrier. We use a 12 mil non-reinforced. It's a solid piece of plastic. It's an extruded virgin plastic, so it's new materials that's being used, and it doesn't have the potential of smelling like any kind of cat urine. If the moisture gets between those vapor barriers and gets on that nylon reinforcement, it can give off an odor in some instances, depending on how cheap the plastic is. So ours doesn't have the ability to do that. So ask them what kind of plastic they're using and make sure that they install that type of plastic. So with the installation of the plastic comes the methodology in which it is installed. In other words, a lot of times they'll cut the plastic around pillars, or they have pieces joining together from the wall to the floor. Ask them how much overlap is there going to be between two pieces of plastic. The minimum requirement is 6 inches. We like to go at least 12 inches if possible of overlap, okay? Once the plastic is overlapped, how do you plan on sealing or joining those overlaps together? We recommend you use at least a 4-inch seam tape. There's a lot of different seam tapes out on the market, but you can check ours out at our DIY store. But we overlap the plastic, like I said, about 12 inches, and then we use a really good waterproof pressure adhesive seam tape. That way it holds those joints really good, because just like anything, that is going to be the weak spot of the plastic, is where you have to join those together. So properly overlapping them and taping them properly is a great way to keep those flood waters from getting up on top of the plastic. And now my last question that you should ask them is, how are you going to attach the plastic to the pillars and the walls? Are you going to use a mechanical fastener, which is what we recommend, or are you going to use an adhesive or a caulk? Believe it or not, most adhesives and caulks do fail over time. Even a butyl tape will eventually fail if it is the only thing used to hold up the vapor barrier. So if you're a DIYer, we like for you to use that butyl tape. It gives you a helping hand in keeping that plastic up, but we also want you to mechanically attach that plastic to the concrete or to the block wall or brick or whatever it is you're using if possible, so that way it stays up forever. So what is your methodology for attaching the plastic to the foundation wall or the pillars? So that'll do it for me. I am Michael Church with Crawlspace Ninja. We hope these were some great questions you can ask your local contractor. We hope you make it a happy and blessed day, and we'll see you later.